It doesn't sound like you guys are going along with that at all.
Well, there's the rub. We have data that suggests that there is stuff beyond 2012 because of the way in which our data lays out. We have word associations to emotions that predict out 5, 10, 15 years, some multiple generations, so 80 or 90 years. So there are levels of language that predict that. We do have a large discontinuity, though, around 2012, which may simply be the juxtaposition of all of this stuff that's happening. However, we have language that suggests a pole shift, geomagnetic as well as geophysical. We have language that suggests two specific solar events, one in early 2012 that scorches a nasty bit of the Earth, and then another in early 2013, say before May of 2013, again, another solar event. It appears to be a radiative event, not necessarily heat or anything like that, but very intense radiation that causes problems. So, end of the world, I don't know, but certainly huge impacts on the species, humans and everybody else, all the other species that are with us. The issue is, are we accurate in having data that projects beyond that date? There's no way I can tell at this point. But in terms of the end of the Mayan calendar, sure, it does appear that the powers that be have engineered the Gregorian calendar in which we all work in the Western civilization to show 2012 as December 21, 2012 at 11:11 a.m., I believe, as being the end of the long count and thus the end of the fifth world of the Mayan calendars. The prophecy for that period of time was relatively specific and suggested a level of what they called the harvest of souls. There's a lot to suggest that we're under extragalactic influence, such as, the weather on Mars, the strange changes in all the other planets, including the large gas giants that are now exhibiting really odd behavior, and their moons are getting odd. So against that real-world benchmark or test, I would have to say that it's better 50-50, better than 50-50 odds, if you will, that that date is of a particular center in a species-changing series of events. But our real scary part shows up in early 2013. A lot of that appears to be influenced by the powers that be. And it may be that they're leaking out a conscious fear of this, or it may be that they're attempting to engineer a fear of it. And we see that kind of thing in movies all the time. But it does appear that they have a real fear that is driving them towards their actions now, and they are fearing the loss of control in these years more than they would fear loss of control after 2012, if that makes any sense at all. In other words, they want to ratchet down tight before we get into this chaotic whatever it is that they're expecting, and they're expecting it in 2012. They expect to survive it, so I don't see any reason to think that we won't also, or at least a large number of us.
Where would the bad radiation parts be hitting? Any in the United States?
Pretty much northern hemisphere. That appears to be the generalized fear of the powers that be at the moment, is of a radiation in the sense of, giant X-ray burst, or not gamma waves so much as harmful radiation in the form of maybe super intense ultraviolet, or, as I say, X-rays, and it would come in and basically hit us as though the solar event of 1859. In that period of time, a solar flare, a rather ordinary but very large coronal mass ejection, caused electricity to flow across anything that could conduct electricity. And so, for instance, thousands of fires were caused out west as sparks flew off the telegraph lines into the dry brush in the forests. We also had all kinds of strange effects across basically from about mid-Russia all the way through the U.S. over to Alaska, and as far north as Scotland, due to this particular coronal mass ejection. A similar event now would be catastrophic in the sense that, people who are dependent for their lives on electricity would die. If you needed electricity to run, dialysis or oxygen meters or something like this, it wouldn't exist. Batteries would fuse, your flashlights wouldn't work, the transformer out on your street would fuse, and the real problem is we don't have a transformer factory in the U.S. to replace it, and even if we could get them from around the rest of the world, the diesel engines inside large transport ships would be haywire and they wouldn't work, and so on. And so we'd be looking at maybe 9 or 10 years of a real intense struggle. And that kind of an event, they appear to want to survive.
That sounds like a natural EMP is what you're talking about.
It's actually a little bit more damaging, because bear in mind that if we're talking X-rays, you would get all these concurrent electrical effects on the electrical system in an EMP kind of fashion, but perhaps anybody that just didn't happen to be shielded just right might get a lethal dose of X-rays in only a matter of a few minutes. We have no way of knowing how intense it's going to be. We do have indications in our data that suggest that in the next year or so, high-altitude airplane flights will simply be restricted to those that are willing to risk death in order to get there, because it'll become a radiation hazard. And this, I think, relates to the magnetosphere that will actually start floating around. It's being destroyed. Our magnetosphere is a protective layer that keeps these high-energy particles and sort of bounces them off like a shield, and it's got holes in it. And these holes are floating around at the moment, but they're several times the size of the planet, bearing in mind that the magnetosphere is way out there on the other side of the atmosphere and is much larger than our planet per se. So when these holes happen to coincide with airplane traffic and radiation bursts in the future, whole airplanes full of people will receive near-fatal doses in a very short period of time, and it'll become quite spectacular as it hits the mainstream press. We think that such events will occur maybe in fall of 2011, just before the real problem starts for what we all think of as the mainstream press, and it'll degrade itself over the following year to the point where none of us pay any attention, and they may not even exist per se.
Well, I see that coming. They're already becoming a non-factor, but we're just about out of time, Clif, so any final thoughts?
Well, we're wrong at least half the time. Our accuracy rate is better than chance. We can give you a good overall context for the emotional stuff in the sense we have high confidence of that, but the individual details is where we start to deviate from what will manifest in your particular life. If you're curious, you can spend $10 and read our reports and get our thinking about it. We've been right in the past, no guarantees for the future, but probably we'll have a few hits in there.
Well, definitely, I'd like to thank you for coming up, and anybody who wants a report, go to halffasthuman.com. It's only $10. I highly recommend you get it if you're interested, and start learning everything you can. Thank you very much, Clif. And
anytime, guys, you just say when.
What's that?
I say anytime in the future, you just say when.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to definitely have you back whenever you got free time, and thanks for coming.
And we'll see let's do it after October 25th and see what's developed.
Oh, that sounds like a good plan. So we'll do it on the 26th.
I'll be talking to you in the future here then. You guys have a good night.
You too.